Pierre-Paul Proudhon was born in 1758 in Cluny, France. He tragically lost both of his parents at a young age and was admitted to the Provincial Academy of Dijon, where he would be mentored by François Desvogés, who was a competent painter. He would then go on to be further educated by Jean-Baptiste Pierre, who was the first painter to the king. After years of training in painting, by 1804 he was a popular portraitist for the imperial family. By 1805, he was commissioned by François to create a piece for the courtroom of the Palace of Justice, in which he created his work, Justice and Divine Vengeance Pursuing Crime. In this painting, we see four figures. We can see a very pale corpse in a rather strange position, a darkened figure who is running from the corpse, and two angels who are pursuing the man. This painting is rather small, but it stood out to me given the extreme contrast and how little color was used. The red of the angel representing divine vengeance and the torch held by the angel representing justice contain the only prominent colors in this painting, and I believe this was intentional choice by Proudhon. Even though the body has some blood from the fatal wounds, the color is so minimal that our eyes do not focus on this so as to not get distracted from the real meaning behind the artwork. In the painting, we have a direct source of light, which comes from the full moon in the upper left corner. The moon, which illuminates the pale, lifeless body of the man, does not give off the same light to the man fleeing the crime. We can barely see his face in the shadow or the rest of his body, besides certain parts of his leg and his back. This quite literally highlights him turning his back to the light as well as him making his attempt to escape. His face is hidden as he escapes because he has committed a serious crime and is trying not to get caught. On the other hand, the angels are more well lit than the man running, but not as much as the man on the floor. The direction of this painting conveys a lot of movement, with the exception of the victim on the ground. The man running with his cloak trailing behind him, the angels gliding towards him, and the background of the clouds all portray movement. There are many different lines in this painting, but many of them are slightly tilted, which usually attributes to movement and energy in still art. The man fleeing from his crimes and the angels not far from behind him to bring forth the consequences of his actions. This painting is culturally significant because it shows that justice is forthright and will always catch up to you no matter how fast you can run. It conveys the message immediately upon viewing, and shortly after Proudhon displayed this piece, it was hung up in the criminal courtroom of the Palace of Justice in Paris behind the judge's bench. He wanted to convey that justice will always prevail and is relentless. In a courtroom, this could be quite intimidating if you were a criminal and on trial for your crimes, and could potentially play a psychological role in your composure. Edgar Degas was born in 1834 in Paris, France, to a moderately wealthy family. He graduated from school with a bachelor's in literature in 1853 and went on to pursue his studies at the Faculty of Law of the University in Paris in the same year. He would then move to Italy in 1856, where he would study art by practicing copying other artworks for 3 years before returning to France. In 1873, when his father would pass, he would inherit his family debts, which he started to fund by selling his house, previous art collection, and by selling his own paintings, which furthered his art career. Most of his well-known paintings were centered around dance, as he would go on to capture ballet dancers' grace as well as their power, but this painting stands out among his collection. This is The Convalescent, which was made between the years of 1872 and 1877. In this painting, Edgar Degas has the viewers focus on a young woman who has a solemn expression on her face as she gazes off into the distance. She is wearing a white gown and a dark cloak, which seems to enclose her and seemingly weigh her down. The color in this piece has a stark contrast between the pale color of her skin, the white of her gown, and the bed behind her, compared to the very dark cloak she wears atop her head and arms, as well as the furniture she leans upon. I believe that this color contrast was intentional and shows us the purity of the unnamed woman and the dark energy that drags her down. The Getty Gallery description includes that melancholy registers in her face and her draped, obscured body, but for the reasons of her condition are not disclosed. The lighting in this painting is all focused on the woman and helps brighten the lighter shades of her skin, as well as the gown and the bed behind her, as well as provide stark contrast to steep the dark shades surrounding her. The contrast between the white and black of this painting leads me to believe that Edgar Degas is portraying either a decision or an internal battle that the woman is facing. But since her condition is not disclosed, we the viewer are left up to our own interpretation of what could be causing her this turmoil. The lines of this painting are all diagonal since she is resting her head on her hand. Her hand is pointing downwards and her head is not upright, giving this painting a pensive and forlorn energy. When I first saw this painting, I was immediately drawn by the directional lines that Degas chose, as most of the other paintings in the room were either straight horizontal or vertical, and the diagonal direction stood out to me. According to the Getty's website, diagonal lines imply that something is in motion, about to fall, and is unstable. I believe in terms of this piece, it represents the woman's instability and that she may be falling internally. Her expression is what really conveys this, as we, the viewer, feel a deep sorrow coming from her watery eyes and the fact that she is attempting to hold herself up. I believe that this is culturally significant because it does not just show a pretty woman or a religious image, but rather a very real and vulnerable woman. A woman who is dealing with something unknown to the viewer, but something that the viewer can tell is a very heavy subject. The Getty's audio cert goes into this more and explains that Edgar Degas was interested in women and their emotional complexities and their psychological conditions. I think that this further implies cultural significance within the feminist movement specifically, as he did not want to portray a surface level understanding of a woman, but rather illustrate a side of women that was very real and very human, something that women weren't entirely recognized as during the time of this painting.